the pain like.
Hey guys, dearyoongi here, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be having a debate. The topic in question that we will be looking at is, should the term and position visual be removed from K-pop? So I'll first of all start by explaining what this term means with a few examples, and then we'll look at the for and against arguments. I did a video kind of like this back when we discussed Jungkook's performance at the World Cup ceremony in Qatar, and I think it would be fun to start doing more of these debate style videos. So without further ado, let's get started. First of all, let's start by dissecting this term. What does it mean to be the visual in a K-pop group? The term visual in K-pop is used to describe the member whose appearance most fits Korea's beauty standards. This therefore also means that this member is usually seen to be and are labelled as the most visually appealing in Korea. And they are also more likely to attract attention primarily based on their appearance. Because of this, they are the member who may be more likely to get sponsorships and advertisements. This of course doesn't mean that other members of the group can't go out and do that extra work, but companies are more likely to approach labels asking for their visual members to advertise their products. This position can sometimes be confused with the face of the group, which is the idea of a member whose face and visual represents the group and is usually the one who springs to mind when you think of them. These two terms aren't exactly the same, but there can definitely be some similarities and overlap. There are so many examples of members labelled the visual within the K-pop world. I can't list them all or else we'll be here all day, and I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with them. One of the most famous examples I can think of is someone like Miss A's Suzy, and as well as people such as Blackpink's Jisoo, Astro's Woo, and of course one of the very earliest examples we seem to have of note of somebody definitely being labelled the visual member, Girls' Generation's Yoona. Although we are quite used to K-pop groups giving their members labels and positions such as main rapper, lead vocalist, etc., the term visual is one that does often garner quite a lot of criticism. So let's look at why in the for and against arguments. First of all, let's start with all the yes arguments for people who are voting in favour of removing this term from the K-pop world. Starting with what I think might be one of the biggest arguments on most of our minds, which is the idea that the term visual diminishes their other talents and contribution to the group. Unfortunately, the term visual has now been known to overshadow every other aspect of an individual who has that title within a K-pop group. And whenever an idol is labelled the visual, suddenly people start to infer from this that they are only in the group because of their looks, and that they don't actually contribute anything else to the group. In a way, it's kind of almost as though people disregard them as serious members of the group who can be extremely proficient in other areas such as singing, dancing, producing, etc. And people immediately assume they've been made the visual because they are talentless everywhere else. An example of who this happened to is Twice's Tzuyu, who is renowned for her visuals in the group, often gets accused of being a visual-only member, meaning that people think she doesn't contribute much else, even though this is completely untrue. It does make you wonder, if she wasn't assigned the role of visual, would people still be attacking her talents and critiquing her in that area as much? We don't know. Even though the idea of being a visual idol is of course a compliment, I think there are some serious negative connotations with it now, and that is now leading to some idols not wanting to be referred to as the visual, with hopes of avoiding people accusing them of being only that and nothing more. In an interview with Irene Plus, Stray Kids' Hyunjin explained how he didn't like being referred to as the visual of the group by saying, "It feels like bragging about something you didn't work for, which is so lame. I understand saying that someone is born with a talent and it's meant to be a compliment, but I don't take that too seriously," showing that he puts more emphasis on other abilities that he may have and offer to the group. Another reason why people might definitely be in favour of removing the term visual from K-pop is because it can definitely be insulting for other members of K-pop groups. Could you imagine being in a group full of members who are all extremely hardworking, have been training together for years to up their game and prepare for debut, and then your fellow group member gets branded the group's visual? Now, of course, I think it's important that we note, although one member gets labelled the visual, that doesn't suddenly mean all the other members of the group can't also be beautiful or attractive. But I think think it's only natural that other group members might feel a little bit awkward, uncomfortable, or even upset by the idea that one member of their group is deemed the most visually appealing member, and then the rest of them kind of just have to deal with the feeling that they are subpar in comparison. It might be strange for us to think of it from the point of view of other members of the group who don't get the title, because we're always thinking about the effects and hate the title holder gets, and we'll never truly know how they all feel. But there's also potential that this sort of dynamic can create tension within the group, and even impact their overall unity and morale when they're constantly getting pitted against one another over something they don't really have much control over. And thirdly, let's look at one more reason why people might want to remove the term visual from K-pop. This term doesn't really translate well into the Western world. It's definitely no secret that K-pop's relevance in the West has skyrocketed in recent years, and while K-pop music is still of course Korean pop and shouldn't have to necessarily reinvent itself to meet Western standards, there are potentially some areas that do perhaps need slight adjustments for other areas of the world, because their true meaning can get lost in translation and be misconstrued, and maybe might not come across the same way Korea intended elsewhere in the world. And I think there can definitely be an argument made that the term visual is a prime example of this happening. In the K-pop industry in Korea, they do see the term visual as representing the member they see as the most appealing in accordance with Korean beauty standards. But these same beauty standards will likely be different in other countries around the world. Not only do most countries have their own interpretation of what beauty means, most of us also as individuals will have our own idea of what we deem as attractive, because something like that is so subjective. Therefore, you could have an idol in a group who is seen as the one who pulls the most attention in Korea and gets deemed the visual because of that, but within the very same group, it could be highly likely that there is another member who appeals more to different audiences around the world, and therefore they would deem them the visual in their eyes. And we do see a lot of this sort of mistranslation with the term visual occurring. Okay, now let's flip over to the other side of this argument and discuss some of the no arguments, aka some reasons why people might think we should not remove the term visual from K-pop. First up, some people might be fine with keeping this term around because they view this as a valid position within a group with its own unique and important promotional purpose. K-pop itself is an industry with a lot of focus around aesthetics and imagery, and what the audience will find most visually appealing. Therefore, there can be a genuine argument made that the idea of being a visual does carry some level of importance and responsibility. Often when people try to name positions within a K-pop group, we immediately jump to reference who the singers are, or who their rappers or dancers are. But after all, it is the visual members who they are expecting to attract an audience of new listeners to pay attention to the group. A group might be packed full of talented singers and dancers, but you won't necessarily see all of that at a surface level. Your introduction to a K-pop group could simply be a picture of them on social media, and in those sorts of circumstances, it is the job of a visual member to grab your attention and make you want to go and watch a music video or listen to their music. It is only then you would really discover the other roles in the group, such as your singers, dancers, etc. Although they aren't necessarily contributing to the final product of a song with this ability, they are contributing to the marketing and overall image the group portrays at first glance. I think this kind of makes us look at this role in a different light. Giving an idol the title of visual can also give them that extra layer of responsibility to get new potential fans interested, which is a weight that other roles within the group might not necessarily carry on their shoulders. Another reason why some people might think we should keep the term visual in K-pop is because it's a much more upfront approach to something that is inevitable. I think that it's always going to be an inevitability within a K-pop group that they get judged for their looks at some point. And to be fair, you could even argue that the same applies to any and every sort of music artist in the pop industry globally especially, and not just in K-pop. In every girl band or boy band to exist ever, there will have been some sort of focus on whichever member was deemed the most good-looking, whether this be in the way they are highlighted within the group or even by the media. Therefore, you could argue that the way the K-pop industry openly labels their visual members is actually a lot more upfront and honest than the way other areas of the world might approach this topic. There is less discussion where other group members might get their names dragged around. The K-pop industry is just open and says, "We know you're probably wondering, so here is who we deem as our visual member." It's much more refreshing and the type of conversation they're probably expecting anyway.
You agree that it's you put your hand up. So who's the best looking?
You're handsome.
Thank you. You're handsome too.
비주얼 최강 비주얼 누구다?
역시 진영이 아닐까.
At least this way it clears up any confusion and avoids any potential awkward discussions, like the ones those of us who have been into K-pop for quite a while will have witnessed in the past. You know, where they'd make idols line up and rank themselves in order of least to most good looking within the group. I'm not even going to divulge into that any further because please God no, it gives me war flashbacks. And thirdly, another rationale we can use for wanting to keep the term visual within K-pop is that it can open up potential other avenues for members of the group to explore. The vocal line members of a K-pop group are always going to be the ones most likely to get other work, doing soundtracks for dramas, musical theatre, etc. And often the rappers of a group might dabble with production or writing. So there are lots of other obvious avenues for them to explore besides being a K-pop idol in a K-pop group. However, not everybody wants to do that. By labeling some idols the visuals of their group, this could potentially open doors for them in other big industry areas such as modelling and fashion, where sometimes music artists might get overlooked unless they're in huge groups or under major labels. Plenty of idols previously named the visual of their group have gone on to do modelling or worked with major beauty and fashion designers. Like we said earlier, this of course doesn't mean that idols without the visual label can't go on and do these things. Of course they can. But it's more the point that being openly known as the visual of the group can make these possibilities more available for artists or group members who perhaps wouldn't have received those opportunities otherwise. Perhaps they might be under smaller labels or less promoted within their group or the industry, etc. Not only will the potential of endorsements with big brands benefit the idols in question and open so many doors for them, it could also have a great impact on the group all round, because them getting their name out there will also increase the recognizability of the whole group name in general because they will be tied and associated with them. Okay, before we wrap up, I feel like I should perhaps give you my opinion on this debate and which side of the fence I sit on. For me personally, I can see and appreciate both sides of this argument if we do keep the word visual around within the K-pop industry, because I can see its advantages. Then I can be okay with that, but only if it's kind of classed as like an extra aspect of an idol's role within their group and not like listed as their official position within the group and nothing else, if that makes sense. What I'm saying is that I would prefer for their other contributions within the group to be celebrated first before we get told, oh yes, and they're our visual too. Like, are they in the vocal line? Are they a rapper? It's more of an afterthought instead, and like a nice added extra for me rather than the main priority. Kind of like Hyunjin said, it is something different than being a good singer or a great dancer. You are being praised for something that you don't necessarily feel like you worked for, and while this may feel nice for a while and feel like it's giving them some sort of other purpose, it's not really the reward or nice feeling people think it is when you're just being reduced down to your looks. I don't think being labelled the visual member is a bad thing by any means. It's just the connotations surrounding the word have made people think it's discrediting an idol's ability, but it doesn't have to. I think we have to kind of change the importance and prominence we put on the word, so idols who do get labelled the visual don't feel like that's all they are being thought of as, and idols who didn't get labelled the visual don't feel any lesser than. Okay, now it's conclusion time and my favourite part where I open up the floor to you guys, because it can't really be a debate until we've had a discussion. So I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic in the comments and what side of this argument you think you personally sit on and why. And that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching if you got this far. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, please hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell. That should let you be the first to hear whenever I upload, and I will see you next time. Bye guys!